Have you ever gotten that feeling that you're repeating yourself in life? Like over the past couple of weeks, I feel like you and I have been doing a lot of the crossover, the baby buggy, practicality, things I don't like. Then over the past 4 years, something like that, you and I have been doing that with Volvo. A lot of crossovers, but we've had some excitement with some station wagons. I just like saying station wagon, estate, pig fair car. But only one, maybe two sedans if you consider the electrified version of the S90. Well, you could imagine I was incredibly excited when the folks at Volvo decided to have the global launch of their next sedan, the S60, not but spitting distance from MotoMan Studio A. So they brought the whole show into town, and I went up there and pilfered one of the cars, brought it back here. So let's take advantage of the opportunity to do a tech review. I'm going to take a stab in the dark here and say you are experiencing some serious deja vu right about now. And that would be understandable because you're fully expecting the exact same engine lineup that we've seen in virtually every 90 cluster Volvo as well as XC60s. And for the most part, you'd be correct. However, this one major change here, which we will work up to. For now, we'll start with the basic building blocks, which is a 2-liter direct injected gasoline engine. And yeah, there is a diesel on offer. No, it's not on offer in the US. And Anders, Stefan, please change that. The most basic one is a T5. That's a turbocharged version of that 2-liter. 250 horsepower comes in at 5,500 RPM. 258 pounds of torque comes in at 1,500 RPM, stays flat all the way up to 4,800 RPM. Then there's this. This is a T6. And it's in the handy-dandy carrying case of an R design. This is the more sporty one. This is the one we're going to drive in the coming full first drive review, so make sure you come back for that. This one's turbocharged and supercharged. 316 horsepower comes in at 5,700 RPM. And then 295 pounds of torque comes in at 2,200 RPM, stays flat all the way up to 5,400 RPM. Then there's the T8, and that is virtually the same engine. However, they do tune it a little bit. So the output from the gasoline engine is 313 horsepower that comes in at 6,000 RPM. And then the torque is the same, 295, 2,200 all the way up to 4,800. Then it adds an electric motor, which is an additional 87 horsepower. Total system output on that one's 400, torque 472. Very similar to what we've driven in other T8 versions of Volvos. Then there's the one that's the major change, and that is the Polestar engineered one. That changes mainly the gas engine. So it's still a 2-liter direct injected, turbocharged, supercharged. However, the horsepower goes up to 328, comes in at 5,800 RPM, stays flat to 6,000 RPM. Not a huge window there. Then the torque changes also to 317. That comes in at 4,800 RPM. So you really have to work it harder to get the kind of power. So think about it. In this one, it's 2,200 RPM. So it's not, you don't have to get into 4,000 RPM to get the power out of this one. Excited to drive the Polestar. We'll get to it probably in like a month or two, so make sure you come back for that. Now, the total output of that system, when you consider the extra horsepower from the engine, and the main reason how they derive it is it's all software. It's a software change that remapping the throttle mapping and remapping the transmission mapping. It still has the electrification in the back, or really all over the vehicle. And then what they've done there is change the total output to 415, and then the torque 494. Now, all of this, whether it's T5 or Polestar, goes through anything you want as long as it's an 8-speed automatic transmission. Inside, there are no changes to discuss. Is that a bad thing? No. Why? Because since the XC90 and every subsequent Volvo over the past 4 years, this is the area that I feel Volvo is not just knocking out of the park, they are mopping the floor with everybody else's ass. And it's design as well as tactile feel and definitely trim. This one, speaking of trim, there are some changes. It's got the sports seats, some of the trim on the door changes, and it's only on offer in black. That's the one thing I would complain about here. Like, remember that V90 R design we had on the show, what, a year ago in Denver? Wow, that was beautiful on the outside with that blue, but the black was just too much. Here's a suggestion for Anders and Stefan. There is this, like, I don't know what they're calling it. It's a classic tweed or twill or whatever it is. It's like a mini tartan. It's like a tight tartan interior, and it's cloth. It's not leather, but wow, does it look good! And it's only on offer in the V60, like the basic one. But think about that on the sports seats of an R Design. That would completely change not just the look of the interior, but I think there'd be some like nostalgia to remember the old like 240 turbos or the 740 wagon turbo that had like a tweed interior. I think you guys need to do that. Other than that, nothing more to discuss inside. I'm not going to bore you with a recap of the concept of scalable product architecture, but I do need to say this. What is presented here is a very tangible example as to why car manufacturers, Volvo in this case, does the whole flexible architecture thing. And the idea is take all the hard work done from the larger car or the smaller car and you scale it up, or in this case, you scale it down. And yes, it creates a whole new vehicle, it creates a whole new entry into a segment, and that's great for the bean counters. But as it relates to us car guys and gals, it changes entirely the way the vehicle drives. And to understand that, we have to understand the dimensions. So the wheelbase, 113.1 inches, overall length, 187.4. Now, that means nothing looking at this episode, but it has a lot to do with cars you already know. Like, for example, a 3 Series, 108-inch wheelbase, a 5 Series, 115. So really, this is kind of a tweener like the old CTS used to be. Then there are the bits that are underneath it. So in the front, it's double wishbones with coil springs and a stabilizer bar. In the back, it's that Corvette-inspired composite transverse leaf spring. And then depending on the suspension setup, there's adjustable dampers and a stabilizer bar, or there's air ride. Now, you need to understand something about air rides in Volvo. In an XC, like a 90 or a 60, air ride is at all 4 corners. But in an S90 or an S60, air ride is only in the back. Then there's this one, which is the R Design. This rides on steel springs. Can be had with air ride, but I don't think you'd want that because the setup is much stiffer in the R Design, and the concept in the back here is to have adjustable dampers, but to increase the stiffness by about 40%. That was the case of the R Design and the XC60. So the same logic and a similar suspension tune applies to the S60. Then there are the brakes, 13.6-inch diameter rotors in the front, 12.6-inch diameter rotors in the rear. Then there's that Polestar engineered model we talked about with the engine. There are some changes as well underneath the car. The brakes in the front go to 14.6-inch diameter rotors, and then the calipers change to Brembos. Then there's the suspension system itself. The actual tuning changes, but also the hardware. Instead of having the R Design tuning, they go to Öhlins dampers. Now, in putting this all together, let's really think about this. All the bits we discussed, with the exception of those Polestar bits, exactly the same as we've discussed in how many other Volvo episodes on how many other Volvos. So it would stand to reason this is going to drive like all those other Volvos. But this is where we need to discuss the mass. So the T5, 250 horse, turbocharged car, 3,657 pounds. Then the dual propulsion, T8 Polestar, everything in it, 3,907 pounds. Not bad when you consider all the things that go into that car. Now, that will be a huge impact on the driving dynamics because all the other Volvos that we've driven in the past 4 years are at least 500 pounds more than this. The XC90s up to 1,300 pounds more. So make sure you come back for the full first drive review when we do spend some time with the T5 of the S60, and we're going to get to that Polestar engineered probably in a couple of months. But in the interim, I'm going to leave you with a question here, and this has nothing to do with the way it drives, everything to do with the design. Specifically the greenhouse. I never focus so much on the greenhouse. You look at this from the side, and I see the greenhouse of a Charger. Am I crazy? Am I right? Am I wrong? Let me know why or why not in the comments below. Or, via our social media, MotoManTV all in word, MotoManTV all in word, Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. And with that, I am going to say it is good to be back in the California Republic, and I think it's time we go for a flight. See you next time. Bis später.